Let us satisfy the atheist and the evolutionist for just a moment. Let's say that there is no God. Let's pretend that it is settled with 100% hardcore scientific evidence there is no God. If there is no God, then of course necessarily there is no intelligence behind anything that is. It all started in randomness and it started accidentally, necessarily. If that's the case, then admittedly, evolution is the best explanation we have in hundreds of thousands of years of human history, according to the evolutionist. So the very best story we have as to our origins and the propagation of all the species is that billions of years ago, an accidental, random explosion occurred. This explosion resulted in a chemical soup. The chemical soup, after millions and millions of years, eventually resulted in a living cell. After millions more years, the living cell eventually decided to develop into a multi-celled organism, the simplest of which was a sponge, and from there a simple worm evolved, and from the simple worm fish evolved, and from the ancient fish more modern fish evolved, and from the more modern fish amphibians evolved, and from the amphibians reptiles evolved, and from the reptiles 3 different branches of reptiles evolved. One of the branches decided that it was going to become a mammal branch, and from the mammals evolved primates, and from the primates evolved a common ancestor to man, and eventually we have man. Now, remember, behind all of this, and this is the best story we have if there is no God, there was no purpose, there was no reason, there is no accountability, there is nothing except what the fickleness of man decides. Of course, it is mathematically impossible to explain how this process that I just described brought about 13 million individual species of known life, not counting the millions of species that scientists say we haven't even cataloged yet. It doesn't explain how their almost irreducible components developed, and how the myriad of systems, subsystems, and subsystems, and the molecular structures, and their systems, and their subsystems, and the mechanics of the quantum world, and the seeming endlessness of the universal world developed. No, it doesn't explain any of that, and it doesn't hold up to mathematical calculations. Evolution also does not begin to explain how this random accidental process that started all that we know as life, how it started without intelligence, yet burst forth in streams of intelligence. Furthermore, how can it be that what started in randomness and without purpose moves forward in an evolutionary process that has as its base necessity purpose? For evolution, we are told, deals in beneficial mutations and survival of the fittest, etc. Are these not mechanisms of purpose, at least rudimentary purpose? Well, of course they are. And if unintelligent processes accidentally, randomly, and without purpose or intelligent input magically evolved into intelligence, how can we then say that we trust our intelligence to tell us how unintelligence and randomness brought us here? Mathematically, logically, philosophically, and scientifically, the entire origins evolution explanation leaves an awful lot to be desired. It is interesting speculation, especially if you leave God completely out of the picture, but it is far from settled science. No matter how loudly the ardent evolutionist screams that it is settled, it is not. Now, on the other hand, let's pretend for a moment, which is not a stretch, by the way, that evolution is not how we arrived here. So what's the best understanding that man has now in 10,000 years of human history? The best understanding that we have is that intelligence is behind the intelligence we know and observe, that reason is behind the logic we know and observe, and that a designer is behind the design that we know and observe, from the quantum level to the universal level. Now, how do we decide who this designer is? Well, we would call him God if for no other reason than that this designer must be so much more than we are, infinitely more intelligent and capable than we will ever be. How do we know which God he might be, though? Well, here is what settles it for me. An old rugged cross, an empty tomb, several thousand years of prophecy regarding every aspect of his life, and 2,000 years of the most scrutinized event in human history still standing as a testimony to the reliability of the Word of God. There is a creator. His name is Yahweh. He is still involved in the creation, which we perverted. He provided the answer, though. He provided the solution for our perversion. He gave his own son, Yeshua, or Yahushua, or, as the English says, converted from the Hebrew to Greek, to Latin, to English, his name is Jesus. But you see, if Jesus is Lord, that means there is a designer, and that there is purpose, and that there is an eternal accountability, and man is not his own God, and evolution is not how we got here. Ah, there it is. You see, there's the problem. There's the answer to our riddle. What is the riddle, you might ask? Why does the atheist insist that evolution is settled science when it so obviously is not? You see, that's the riddle. But now you know the answer. God bless you. Keep your eyes on Jesus. He is coming soon. Do you ever wish that you could more powerfully, succinctly, and accurately speak to the message of your Christian faith and the Word of God? This is the book you need, The Magic Man in the Sky, Effectively Defending the Christian Faith. This book has been featured on TBN, Atlanta Live, dozens of radio programs, and hundreds of markets. It was rave reviewed by the Washington Times, and it was called a must-read book. Considering the times in which we now live, you need this book. Get it today on Amazon.com or the WND Superstore.